Since Shabbat was every week in my home growing up, it was something that I wanted in my home once I got married. Being married to a Gentile woman, she was supportive of that. She didn't chafe against that. She appreciated why that was important. She was even willing to learn to say the guttural CH of the brachot, so she could say, Baruch atah Adonai. That was a pretty funny lesson. My wife lights the candles. We do a Messianic version of the candle lighting blessing. I say kiddish and say the motzei over the Challah, and sometimes use your little siddur and read Proverbs 31 and Psalm 112 to each other. And when our kids are around, say the blessings over our kids. That was just a big part for us. And what was really sweet, I went to school in Columbia, South Carolina for 3.5 years. Where do you find a challah in Columbia, South Carolina? I'm sure that there were stores somewhere that sold them. We didn't know where they were. And so my wife started baking challah, and this is back in 1980. Almost every Shabbat since 1980, she has baked fresh challah for us. And so our kids, that's all very familiar to them. They do it with their kids. It's really a wonderful thing to see.
How do you celebrate Shabbat in your home?
Well, my home is a little different. Before I was married, we had Israelis living with us. And so that was probably when we started experiencing Shabbat every week. And that was really interesting. It was a learning experience for us. And of course, that connected us to our Jewishness. My husband got to experience some of that as well. After we got married, we never continued with that. So we do not actually celebrate Shabbat every week. I guess you could say we're more Christian in our home.
So for us, Erev Shabbat is the weekly cycle. So it's a very important day for us because our whole week revolves around this day. So in our house, we'd start preparing for thinking about what's going to happen in Erev Shabbat by Wednesday. And Thursday, we start working to that. Friday is focused on that. And so my wife, she will make challah, make it from scratch. This is just what we do in our home. We have pretty ornate Shabbat table. We invite a lot of people in. It's usually there's a lot of people at our house and we celebrate Shabbat. And we do it in a more traditional manner in that we've got a siddur that we use at home, but it's our own siddur. It's not any official one. And we started off small, and as my children have got older, we've added more and more pieces. While we do the lighting of the candle, we don't actually add the additional Messianic version. We just keep it the traditional version. And I totally understand that there's no commandment in the scripture to light the candles. I get that. But there is the idea of setting the day apart from everything else. And so, again, taking the things that are the traditions of our people, understanding it within the context of Messiah, without having to change it to be our own thing, is pretty valuable for us. And this way, I know that my family or any of my children can go to any Jewish home of non-believing Jewish people, feel totally comfortable and integrate within that community without going, I've never heard this, I don't know how that goes. This is just how we do it. My goal has been to raise my children up in a Jewish way, in such a way that they can be in a community and know this is how it works. Right? And so in that way, the sociological aspect is very important. But primary is the identity Messiah. I would forgo everything as long as Messiah stays the priority. But I think that it's fair to say you can do both and not compromise.
So we're not shomer Shabbos. We don't try to keep a rabbinic approach to Shabbat, but we are Shabbat observant in that we believe Shabbat is like a tithe of our time, the same way you tithe of what God provides for you. And it's a way of saying, Lord, you enabled me to work all week to provide for my family. And I am taking this time and giving it to you to remind myself and my family that you are our provider. You're the one we're trusting and we're believing in, which I think is part of why God gave us Shabbat to begin with, just to identify us with himself as the God of creation, the 7-day creation. I think that's critical. It's almost like I'm with him, when you observe Shabbat in some way, it's like saying, no, I'm with him.
But even this specific day has become very problematic because many think that there's an obligation to keep the Shabbat as we did in the Mosaic covenant. And that's just not true. The scripture is very clear that in the new covenant, we enter into the rest of Messiah. Shabbat is a person. right? The person of Messiah more than it is a day. And we can have that same Shabbat rest any day of the week. However, the practice of Shabbat is important. The reason I bring this up is because so many people, I hear it all over from people within the church and Christianity that have discovered Shabbat all of a sudden and now want to obligate not only themselves, but everybody to the practices of Shabbat. It's really a challenge because now they start to want to replace us as Jewish people from the Gentile church and tell us this is how you should do Shabbat. And it's like, hold on a second, you just got here. I think it's important to make that distinction. Shabbat is important, it's who we are, but as a practice, but theologically, there's no obligation to keep the Shabbat because we rest in the person of Messiah.